The one thing that I would want more than anything in the world, more than my kids staying healthy, more than all the money in the world, more than a stripper pole installed in my bedroom, for me, is for Phil Collins to release new music, a new album, a new song, maybe like acoustic versions of his greatest hits. Another Disney thing, I guess. I don't care. Anything, nothing more would make me happier. And while news of this potential new music has been going viral over the last couple of days, I have some sort of sad news to report. Let's go back to what I'm referring to here. You see, there was an Instagram post that was posted earlier this week. It's a fantastic post by Simon Napier Bell, who's working on a documentary for The Marquee. Now, let me just rewind for a second and give a shout out to my friend Tracy Baker at the campaign Get Phil Voted In. This is where I learn about all of my new Phil Collins news. I can't stay up with all the different people in his orbit that are posting things online. For whatever reason, the other night I couldn't sleep, so I came downstairs to have like a bowl of cereal at 3 a.m, which is why I have such a great figure. And I open up Facebook and I see this feed, this post. It's a picture of Phil. Because it was low resolution and because it was 3 o'clock in the morning, I wasn't 100% sure it was Phil. Also, he looked a lot different than the last time we'd seen him. He looked a little skinnier. He looked happier, in fact. There's 3 things about the post that really blew up, and let me talk about them. First of all is how Phil looks. Okay, as I mentioned, I think he looks really good. Like, would you say he looks frail? Sure, but he actually was kind of heavier a couple of years ago, and so I think that he looks a little fitter, in my opinion. I love to see him smiling. The beard looks good on him. To me, he looks like a little bit more reminiscent of how he used to look in the early Genesis days. I think he looks great. He's wearing a nice little polo. In fact, it was the polo, the Lacoste polo, that was like, he does wear that quite a lot. Because I wasn't sure it was real. I wasn't sure. And there's a bunch of like AI crap going around lately, or people, there's all these like spam posts that are coming on, like somebody died in a car accident or Peter was involved in a plane crash. I don't know why people are making these fake articles, like what their appeal is, like they're going for clicks and ad dollars or whatever. So I just kind of thought this was maybe fake at first, but then I was like, oh no, Phil does wear those polos. So I think he looks great. The second thing that was really interesting, and I'll read you the line. He was in top form, full of wicked stories, hugely fun. Love to hear that. And by the way, this is such a big deal because we haven't seen a picture of Phil. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've seen a picture of Phil since the Drumeo interviews back in, I want to say, late 2022, maybe even late 2021. I can't remember when that was. It was a long time ago. So to hear that he was hugely fun, in top form, that was really cool. Here's the 2 other pieces that got everybody really, really excited. Number 1, the sentence, and he just had his studio revamped. So is this true? We don't know if this is true, but this is kind of cool. Why would you renovate a studio? If you sold your back catalog, you're not planning on doing anything new. Why would you revamp your studio, renovate your studio? I mean, that's a really, really great sign there. Is it Phil just goofing off? Is it maybe going to be used to like approve some reissues? Maybe it's just for him to listen to music. Who knows what the plan is? And then the third sentence that's really exciting is, for sure, before too long, we're going to hear some new music. This part is what got people really excited. Phil looking good, Phil revamping his studio, and then a person of credibility, a music producer, a person of credibility claiming that there's new music on the way. Maybe he heard something. There was so much in this post to be excited about, and people have been posting it on Reddit and on Facebook and Instagram and talking about it all week. And within a couple of days, the major publications were picking it up. NME, Exclaim here in Canada, Rolling Stone, a couple prog blogs as well, Stereogum, they're running with this story that Phil might have new music on the way. In fact, there was a thought that it could be even really soon. We're coming up on the 4th quarter. Peter just did an album last year. Maybe Phil's got something he's been working on. This post went viral, and when it started going to the major publications, that's when I reached out to Tracy to see if she would do a little chat with me and we could speculate about what all these things could be. Then I hit a wall. Let me explain. When I started seeing the major publications like Rolling Stone, NME, and Stereogum pick up the story, I read it carefully because I wanted to see if they would use their journalistic integrity to take the story one step further. Here's what really kind of surprised me and worried me a little bit about this story is how come none of these guys have asked for a comment? How come none of these guys have gone to the second level or reached out to management to see if there's any truth to this? Certainly, people would have been involved at some level, maybe Harry or Brad or Daryl. Somebody maybe would have known, maybe Nick, his son, that there's music being worked on. How come none of these publications reached out for a second opinion or to verify this? Well, I get it. Maybe they're just social interns and they're just trying to create clickable content really quick based on random Instagram posts. But for me, and for my obsession with this story, I needed to take it a step further. I couldn't sleep. The thought of new music from Phil was so exciting. I had to take it a step further. And so that's what I did. I asked Tony Smith. I was confused as to why NME and Rolling Stone hadn't thought to verify the story, and so maybe I'll just send the email. Worst case scenario, he doesn't respond. Best case scenario, he responds and says, new album on the way. Or the sad reality of the email I did receive an hour later. No plans for new music. No plans for new music. You know, I was so excited to chat with Tracy about this. I was so excited to engage with some of the dialogue. We're going to expand on this in just a couple of minutes here about what that music could have been like and maybe why he's allowed to make new music. But to have that giant bucket of water dumped on our bonfire was really devastating. No plans for new music. I was like, damn it. I was really getting excited. I mean, I'm still thrilled to see Phil doing interviews, looking great. We know the Drumeo stuff is coming out sometime this year. Brandon from Drumeo has confirmed that to me. So we have a couple months left to see that interview with Nick and Drumeo and Phil. But wow, what a bummer. What a bummer. That's just classic Tony to rain on our parade. But I'm glad he responded. I'm glad we got the truth out there. So hopefully we can kind of put this to bed. But it's so great. You know, we talked about the virality of Phil Collins. Anytime there is something remotely new coming from him, it makes the press. And then all of our little Facebook groups and Reddit groups and Discords are just blowing up, exploding with conversations and arguments about what it could be. And so, you know, even the Both Sides reissue that is coming out soon, and the 75th anniversary remasters from Acoustic Sounds, like all these things that are happening get people talking. It just shows the love for him and for the band. So it means to me that like new music could be possible. It's not crazy to think of new music happening. Tons of artists of his vintage release late career releases. People like David Bowie, Peter Gabriel, Ray Charles, Bob Dylan, Willie Nelson, Joni Mitchell. One thing someone said to me is it possible that Tony's covering? Is it possible Tony's lying, that there is something in the pipeline and he's just, you know, doing the kind of press thing to keep the mystery, the excitement up? I don't think so. Tony's not like that. A lot of people know Tony and have seen Tony in the interviews over the years or how he interacts in documentaries. He doesn't seem like the kind of person that would cover that up. This isn't like a 30-year-old publicist for Taylor Swift who has to keep an album secret. At this stage in Phil's career, I don't think there's a huge need to create any sort of suspense or mystery. I think if this was true and Tony didn't want to divulge, then he probably wouldn't respond to my email. When this story was breaking, let's talk about two things that I saw a lot on social media that kind of upset me, and I want to kind of come to the defense of this story a little bit. First of all, whenever I talk about the future of Phil, it's always a very popular topic. However, there's always a lot of comments that are like, leave Phil alone, let him retire. Hasn't he given us enough? I completely agree with that. By the way, this post was from somebody else. This is Phil doing an interview. This is Phil sharing that he's revamped his studio by way of Simon. But I don't think any of us are demanding that Phil owes us something. We're not telling him to come out of retirement and to make us something. If he does, a lot of us would be thrilled. So to the people who say, leave him alone, let him retire, he's allowed to retire. I am leaving him alone. But if new music does come out, if anything comes out, even reissues, I'll take it and I'll talk about it. I'm not banging on his door asking for new music because I don't have his address. If I did have his address, I would bang on his door and beg for new music. The biggest conversation happening around this is Phil too old? Is Phil too far gone from his prime to release new music? This is ridiculous. This is not how music is made. This is not how art form is made. This is not the presidential election. You don't hit an age limit and then you have to stop. People talk about Phil's voice on the Last Domino tour. Listen, I've heard soundboard recordings. I've heard bootlegs from the Last Domino. I was there at the Last Domino. Assuming there was no backing tracks, assuming there was no pitch correction happening, Phil hit a bum note like maybe 2 or 3 times per song. Nobody's voice sounds good in a hockey arena. Phil's voice sounded fine. It sounded fine. Phil's voice will always be better than Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, and Neil Young and Tom Waits combined. Not only that, but when you record in the studio, there's something called vocal comping. This has nothing to do with auto-tune or pitch correction. Vocal comping is where you record anywhere between 10 to 30 or 40 takes of the same song over and over and over. Then the editor will look through those 20 different takes and they'll go line by line, sometimes word by word, but usually phrase by phrase. And they'll listen to each one and they'll find the best performance, the best natural performance of each line. And then they'll comp it together. They'll pick the best phrase from each of the 20 or 30 takes, and they'll do that for the whole song. And that'll leave you with one take that sounds completely natural, but it's just the best attempt at each phrase. That's how everybody makes a record. It doesn't involve any artificial pitch correction or auto-tuning. That's something you can apply later. And by the way, auto-tuning isn't T-Pain. T-Pain auto-tuning is at 100% applied effect. But most artists will use maybe 10 or 20% of pitch correction that just sort of tightens up your voice a little bit and isn't audible to anyone. So Phil doing a great record with a good-ish sounding voice, yeah, is it going to be as good as it was 40 years ago? No, you dummies. And is he going to play drums? No. Most pop stars don't play drums in their album. There's plenty of people who could play drums for him. Both his sons play drums. Chester Thompson still plays drums. Gosh, wouldn't that be amazing? Not to mention, he used drum machines a lot of the time. And somebody even said on Facebook, can he even play piano anymore? Who cares? So is Phil too old and too frail to make new music? Shut up. Not only that, but I'm very curious about what is already recorded. I mean, he's been probably demoing ideas his whole career. Have we heard all of those things? No. What's on his hard drive since Testify? His voice was great back in the Testify era. So maybe a few years after Testify, when he was working on new material that never became anything, what does that sound like? We know that shortly after Testify, before 2007, when he was living in New York, I think at the time, and he had a little studio that he was chipping away at. I think even up to after 2007 and leading up into the book, I think he was dedicating time each week in a studio. So there's stuff recorded that we would really appreciate to dig up. Anyway, there you have it. It's so great to see this story go viral. I would have loved for it to be true. It was probably one of the most exciting posts we've seen in a long time. And Tony said some other things in the email that I won't disclose, but it really just doused the fire and basically said that it's not true. This isn't happening. I don't know about the studio revamp. I think that's either way, that's cool. Even if Phil just kind of goofs off and plays with drum machines for the rest of his life and we don't get to hear it, I'm still happy about that. That's cool. The virality of this post proves that there's still an appetite for Phil music. I think of Phil, I've always said this, the type of record that I think Phil would make is the type of record that Johnny Cash made with Rick Rubin. In fact, Johnny Cash and Rick Rubin were doing stuff for maybe about 10 or 15 years, I think. And I think Rick has said that Johnny was recording music right up until a few days before he passed away, and you could hear it in his voice. He couldn't even open his mouth on the last record. He was so frail, but it was beautiful. I mean, some of the best, I think Johnny's best work was with Rick Rubin. I really do, and I think a lot of people would agree. I think there's a frailty and an honesty to music like Bowie's last record. I think it's a beautiful thing when people late in their career work on tracks. Are we going to hear tracks like Easy Lover again, or Dance Into the Light, or Wear My Hat? No. But I think there is a type of record that could be made, and I think it could do really well. I mean, look, I think when does the Grammy nominations come out? They come out maybe a couple months from now. I think we're going to see Peter Gabriel nominated for Playing for Time and for his album. I think there's an appetite for legendary artists at this seemingly at the end of their career to be honored. And so I do think there is a place for new Phil music. Part of me wants to reply to Tony and say, come on, let's do this. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing if you're new to the channel for all the tons of Phil and Genesis exciting stuff. And thanks to our Patreons for supporting this channel for so many years.